Chapter 1136 Significant Transfer. Translator, Nomiyami. Editor, Nomiyami. Everyone suddenly seemed to gain an appetite, so they ordered a few more dishes and ate with a lively atmosphere. Fang Rui left the next day, and all that was left were the contract negotiations with Club Windhowl. When the player had a preference as to where they were going, it generally wasn't difficult to reach a deal. Windhowl was truly shocked at Fang Rui's final choice, but in the end they respected his wishes. However, they were disappointed when Happy said that they weren't going to buy Doubtful Demon as well. They had originally planned to sell off Fang Rui and Doubtful Demon together, permanently making the rookies Tang Hao and Zhao Yujie the core of their style, and abandoning the dirty playstyle once and for all. Who would have thought that Fang Rui would leave without his character? He actually wanted to change classes to Chi Master. Are you sure? Quote, there were still feelings between Windhowl and Fang Rui after so many years. For someone who'd already become an all-star player, it seemed like there was no reason for him to change classes. It was illogical. Seeing that Fang Rui wanted to do this, Windhowl had to say something, whether it was for Fang Rui's own interests, or their plan to sell the player and character together. I'm sure, since returning from Happy, Fang Rui was completely certain of his decision. What kind of poison did Happy brainwash this guy with to convince him to accept these conditions? Windhowl, after having their plan messed up, was at a loss as to what to do. But for the sake of the team's image, they had to respect the wishes of the player, especially for an important player like Fang Rui. Windhowl then planned to negotiate with Happy, but Happy completely rejected their attempts to sell Doubtful Demon, so in the end, Windhowl could only start putting up a price. In terms of price, this sort of voluntary transfer sale would never go too high. Additionally, Fang Rui was mediating, so Windhowl didn't expect to make much money from this. After they talked back and forth, they soon decided on a transfer fee of 4 million. After news of the transfer was released, the entire alliance wondered if they had read incorrectly. Fang Rui chose Happy. This was as shocking as when Xiao Shichen chose to transfer to the relegated Excellent era last season. Were all the All-Stars taking unconventional routes now? But no matter what, the transfer satisfied the rules, so Fang Rui's transfer was quickly approved. Now, Fang Rui was officially a member of Happy. Because there weren't too many issues to be worked out, the transfer was swiftly completed. The media was still in the middle of figuring out which teams were more interested in Fang Rui when the contract was already signed. When the media caught wind of this, Happy was already holding a news conference. Happy didn't yet have a specialized PR department, so the conference was arranged by a PR company they had found to help. After the news released, the various esports media all came without even being invited. It was a full house, and there were endless requests for private interviews. Chen Guo, Yi Xiu, and Fang Rui were the three participants in the press conference, and it was completed as planned. Meanwhile, the rights to an exclusive interview were of course given to the reporter Chang Xian of City H's esports home. Chang Xian was ecstatic. When he had first noticed Happy, he hadn't been thinking about gambling on the growth as a team. He was just a newbie in the industry. How would he have such foresight? He was just doing the ordinary thing, reporting on this grassroots team that had gained some attention. Who would have thought that with this gamble, he had won big? After Happy won the Challenger League Championship, Chang Xian felt how fortunate he was. He could sense his status at esports home rising, and the editor-in-chief spoke with him in person much more often. And now, Fang Rui was transferring to Happy. In the summer transfer window, he had obtained the first major exclusive interview since Excellent Era disbanded. Undoubtedly, this interview would be on the front page of next week's edition of Esports Home. Facing Fang Rui, Chang Xian was slightly apprehensive. He had been with Happy's members for a while now and was familiar with all of them, but that was partly because of their humble beginnings as a team. Chang Xian had never felt too much of a professional atmosphere from them. But Fang Rui was different. Facing an interview, he had the aura of a god. Chang Xian was reminded of when he was just starting out in the industry, and the pressure he felt when he was tagging along with senior reporters to carry their bags. And now, he was facing this aura by himself. God Fang Rui, may we begin? Fang Rui steadied his emotions. He knew, after today, he would be facing countless interviews like this. Fang Rui was transferring. This was the first big news. Fang Rui was switching classes. This was the second big news. At the press conference, when they learned that Fang Rui would be playing with Boundless Sea, the entire pro circle went wild. What was the reason? During the press conference, Fang Rui grinned and said, "Because Happy's broke. They can't afford Doubtful Demon, so I could only switch to using Boundless Sea." Who would believe that? The number one thief, an all-star player, was treated like this after being bought. Even if Happy was willing to waste talent like that, how could Fang Rui agree to such treatment? Compared to Fang Rui's transfer, his change to Chi Master suddenly became a much more exciting topic of discussion. WatchOurWorldAudio.com. This is truly an unprecedented decision. If I recall correctly, before you, there's never been a top player who chose to change classes like this. One reporter said. "What do you mean?" Yishu suddenly interjected, dissatisfied. "Didn't I do that too?" Silence. This, how to put it? Even if an unspecialized wasn't a real class, it certainly wasn't the Battle Mage class that Yishu had always played. This was indeed a class-changing player, and he was sitting right in front of all of them. How had they missed it? The reporter who had spoken was filled with shame, while the others asked themselves, why hadn't they realized that Yishu was also a class-changing player? And the more attentive reporters now realized another point. I remember Happy's Qiao Yivan, when he was in Tiny Herb, he was using an assassin, but now he's changed classes to a ghost blade. You're correct. Yishu nodded. The reporters glanced at each other. Team Happy actually had 3 class-changing players. Was this Happy's style, some hidden attribute? The purpose of the press conference was primarily to deliver news, so the reporters didn't have much time to ask questions. There was simply no opportunity for them to get to the bottom of this situation. And the one who had obtained the opportunity to do so was Chang Xian, with the exclusive interview. He was now rather smug as he asked about the details. Why did you decide to change classes to Chi Master? Because of Happy's invitation. What kind of invitation was it that could cause you to make such an important decision? An extremely sincere invitation. How sincere? Very, very sincere. Look at my eyes, Fang Rui said. Chang Xian felt like crying. It was no use, he was still too young, too inexperienced. He had no control over this master of playing dirty. End chapter. The King's Avatar, Chapter 1137, audio source, WatchOurWorldAudiobook.com. Chapter 1137, Happy the Dark Horse. Translator, Nomiyami. Editor, Nomiyami. Having accepted an exclusive interview, Fang Rui naturally wouldn't call the reporters over and just mess with them. After making his jokes, he answered the questions seriously, from personal to team, and explained his reasons for changing classes. In the following issue of the Esports Home, Chang Xian's exclusive interview naturally made the headlines. This exclusive interview with Fang Rui took the chance to introduce Team Happy's team structure and future plans after the actual interview. This thorough analysis even caught the attention of the pro scene. After reading it, many of the pros suddenly realized that Team Happy's current class combination had many possibilities to it. Just considering Fang Rui's shocking addition, what class was Fang Rui's most familiar partner? A brawler. Coincidentally, there happened to be a brawler in Happy's lineup as well. Even though Fang Rui had switched classes to a Chi Master, this didn't mean his familiarity with working with a brawler would vanish. Then, consider Fang Rui's class switch. The Chi Master had been Yishu's most reliable ally when he had built Excellent Tira's dynasty. After that, the Chi Master had consistently been a core class in Excellent Tira's lineup. Yishu was very familiar with working with Chi Masters, and Sumo Chung wouldn't be alien to it either. In addition, Team Excellent Tira's ace had been a battle mage. Coincidentally, Happy also had one. It wasn't hard to imagine that Excellent Tira's traditional strategies would all be realized once more in Happy. After this analysis, everyone finally realized how agreeable Fang Rui's arrangement to transfer to Happy was, as well as how the arrival of a Chi Master would unite Happy. Now, Fang Rui and his Chi Master seemed like Happy's tactical core, connecting all the pro characters. But even if he achieved such an effect, he still wasn't the core of Happy. Who was the core? Even an idiot would know it was Yishu. And what class was Yishu? Unspecialized. There was very little high-end research done on this class, so no one was certain what role it played in the team competition. This was the foundation on which Happy was built, but it was also the most mysterious. Though Yishu and Lord Grimm had appeared quite early on, the people in the pro scene were simply curious. Who would have thought to start researching an unspecialized so soon? But now, Yishu really did return, bringing his unspecialized and a team that didn't seem weak at all. If there was anyone that still looked down on Happy before, then they had to change their minds after Fang Rui's transfer. Yishu, Sumo Chung, Fang Rui. This was a team with 3 all-star level players. If this wasn't worthy of careful consideration, then what kind of team was? Naturally, Happy's characters would be a little weaker, their facilities wouldn't be as well established, and their finances would also be a little tighter. However, no one dared underestimate them in a match. With 3 top players, no one would disregard them as a threat. Grassroots. A grassroots team with 3 all-star level players. No one could continue calling them such. Were they a dark horse? Would Happy be a dark horse in this season? Just like last season's Heavenly Swords. No, not even Heavenly Swords was so dark. That was mostly blown out of proportion on purpose. The discussion that arose around them had garnered them more attention from the people. With more attention, there were also higher expectations. Their darkness had been from public opinion. As for Happy, with 3 all-stars, no one dared to say that they weren't a dark horse. All the glory-related forums, all the experts and noobs in the scene, even the pro scene, were discussing what sort of impact Happy might have on this season. Happy had suddenly become much more imposing in comparison to when they had fought in the Challenger League. All this came from Fang Rui's arrival, from Happy's daring in completing such a significant transfer. This was an attitude of the players and of the team. An all-star player held Happy in high regard and joined Happy. Happy dared to spend this money on an all-star character, an all-star player. Happy's goal was the championship title. There weren't many people laughing now. A team with 3 all-stars was a strong team in the eyes of normal players, a team that had a right to fight for the championships. Those who were rational were still considering Happy's flaws from different perspectives, but most people had gotten carried away by their excitement over Fang Rui's transfer. Happy champions. There were people who really did dare yell this sort of slogan. Before now, even Seven Fields and the others, who had been loyal since they had met Yi Xiu in the 10th server, had been too embarrassed to face Happy's goal of winning the championships. But now, any random Glory player could methodically explain how powerful Happy was to you. With this transfer, Happy gained the spotlight once more. That was when the Glory Game Company and the Pro Alliance came knocking. They wanted to begin issuing Team Happy merchandise such as character models, Happy Style accounts, etc. The rights to the creation and sale of these products were given to a third party upon joining the alliance, so they didn't have to worry about finding someone to work with. As for the profit, all teams would gain the same percentage of the revenue generated. There was little that the team actually had to do. They just had to provide their appearance and then do well in competitions, gain popularity and promote the sales of their merchandise. In the preliminary plans of the Alliance and the game company, someone as popular as Sumo Chung wouldn't be missing. Even last season, when she had gone to the Challenger League with the rest of Excellent Era, merchandise regarding her and her Dancing Rain was still popular. Now that Dancing Rain had come to Happy with Sumo Chung, the two coming together as a package was a good thing for the merchandise company. For example, the hottest merchandise were character models with Dancing Rain's equipment as a launcher and Sumo Chung's actual figure and appearance. In comparison, Chu Youngshu and Misty Rain were in an awkward situation. The player was a lady but the character was a guy, so they couldn't merge the two together. Thus, in the end, they could only sell Misty Rain's character model. As for the player model, those weren't as popular. Everyone preferred the epic appearance of the character model. No one had noticed this situation at first, but by the time they did, teams like Team Misty Rain were rather depressed. With the high status gained by being in the pro scene and the mutual benefits gained along with the game company, asking to get the character's sex and appearance changed wouldn't do anything to the balance of the game. WatchOurWorldAudio.com. However, Misty Rain had been a guy for so long. Everyone was used to it already. If they suddenly changed his sex, then their fans probably wouldn't be able to accept that, so Misty Rain could only endure it. But this time, after acknowledging the strength of the twin sisters that Misty Rain had contracted, they decided that they would make sure to not make the same mistake and contacted the game company to change the sex of the two characters while they still had a little influence. Since this change wasn't a game changer, the normal players didn't mind the pro scene having this special benefit. In their eyes, it was a good thing for them to align the sex of the character with the player, especially with two beautiful ladies playing two guys. For Happy, Sumo Chung and Dancing Rain were good to go. Then there was Tang Ro and Soft Mist. With her beauty and grace, she was perfect in the alliance. The game company viewed her as a treasure, finding a talented team to create a model of Soft Mist with Tang Ro's appearance. Then, they just had to hope that Tang Ro would be able to play well and gain fame. After all, this was a competitive scene. For Happy, they had wanted to create 3 different models and account cards. Sumo Chung and Tang Ro were good, now there was Yi Xiu, who was an entirely different problem. Originally, their hopes for Yi Xiu were even higher than Sumo Chung and Tang Ro. This was a top-tier expert that had hidden himself away for all these years. Now that he was willing to show himself, the Alliance and game company wanted to take this chance. But when it came to collecting the materials, the game company was close to crying. Glory had been designed by them. This, naturally, included the equipment available, and Lord Grimm's mix and match equipment could even cause the game company to be lost in wonder. What sort of talent did you have to manage to find such an ugly combination of equips? When designing the game, they naturally wouldn't make ugly equipment. The equipment would be perfect and beautiful or have some sort of uniqueness to it that left a lasting impression. However, why was Lord Grimm's set so uncomfortable to look at? In that moment, the game company had a thought to cheat and modify Lord Grimm's equipment design and make this mix and match a better sight to look at. But it was only a thought. This sort of change would have too big of an effect. Although the design didn't affect the stats and technically wasn't a game changer. If they made the equipment look good on Lord Grimm, what would they do if the equipment looked terrible when someone else wore it? In the end, it was Lord Grimm's abnormal class choice that made his equipment diverge from the beauty of the game. Experts had observed Lord Grimm's current design for a long time, discussed it for a long time, but they all shook their heads in the end and admitted defeat. The Alliance was depressed. The game company was depressed, but they refused to give up on thinking of a way to profit, coming up with another idea. They were going to make a commemorative version of One Autumn Leaf. Yes, that One Autumn Leaf, one with Yishu's appearance. That would probably make up for many people's disappointment, right? Would it really? Soon enough, someone voiced this doubt. It wouldn't be hard to make this combination right now. Although One Autumn Leaf already belonged to Samsara, they just had to split some of the profits with Samsara and Happy. The problem was that One Autumn Leaf simply didn't have Yishu's appearance, but the model was already very popular. The commemorative version would be simply adding in Yishu's face. Models were based primarily on the impressive designs of the characters. Adding in the player's appearance was just to show their love. The excellent era One Autumn Leaf had garnered a lot of buyers already and was just lacking Yishu's face. Would adding his face really make any difference? After careful consideration, they hesitated. After all, as players of this competitive scene, their value never lay in their faces. Why was this Yishu always so troublesome? The Pro Alliance and Glory Game Company felt like they were going to cry. End chapter. The King's Avatar, Chapter 1138. Audio source, WurshaWorldAudiobook.com. Chapter 1138. Keep our spots and become the champions. Translator, Nomiyami. Editor, Nomiyami. Happy was becoming more and more prosperous by the day. The season hadn't started yet, but the transfers, both accounts and players, were eye-catching enough already. The Pro Alliance and the Glory Game Company were even more worried than happy. Let alone new rising teams in the Alliance, most teams didn't get such treatment. No team was willing to lag behind Happy. Everyone was doing their best to find ways to improve. Team Wind Howl, who had been the backdrop behind Fang Rui's transfer, was currently having a headache about what to do with Doubtful Demon. Team Wind Howl displayed quite the benevolence towards Fang Rui's transfer. Even though they would rather offer him as a package with Doubtful Demon, in the end, they didn't make things difficult for Fang Rui if he wanted to leave alone and let it pass. But as a result, dealing with Doubtful Demon became much more complicated. They no longer had a thief player. Doubtful Demon clearly need to be sold. If not, leaving him there in the team but not using him was just waiting for it to depreciate. Understanding this point, the crafty teams in the Alliance wouldn't be impatient to act. They were planning on patiently waiting. When the time came, they would go and negotiate with a lower price. For a moment, it was as if no one wanted Doubtful Demon. Just when the teams were patiently waiting for the right moment, the sudden news of another transfer disrupted their plan. Team Blue Rain's Lin Feng had been transferred to Team Wind Howl for 3.2 million. The Glory Circle was completely stunned. From the price of 3 2 million. It could be seen that Lin Feng wasn't a top-tier player, but he was a thief player. Team Wind Howl sent away Fang Rui and decided to abandon the thief's dirty playing style. Suddenly, they invited Lin Feng. What were they doing? Could it be that they wanted to raise Doubtful Demon's price, so they intentionally mystified the situation? Quite a few people thought of this possibility, but they also felt it was too ridiculous to believe. But not long afterwards, several skillful people analyzed the background behind this transfer. It was true that thieves were very suitable for playing dirty, but that didn't mean that was the only style they could play. As for Wind Howl, they may have given up on dirty play, but that didn't mean that they had given up on thieves. As a result, the master of playing dirty, Fang Rui, may have left, but it was ambiguous if the thief, Doubtful Demon, would leave. When Wind Howl saw that selling Doubtful Demon wasn't going well, they gave their answer: Doubtful Demon would not be leaving. Because of Lin Feng. Lin Feng was a substitute on Team Blue Rain. He had a few opportunities to appear on stage, but his position wasn't as stable as the core members. Even so, he had his own style. His thief didn't play dirty. Team Blue Rain wasn't suited for playing dirty. As a result, he grabbed the attention of Team Wind Howl. The dirty Doubtful Demon was gone. A new Doubtful Demon had risen. In the press conference for Lin Feng's addition to the team, it wasn't hard to see Team Wind Howl's hopes for the new Doubtful Demon. Up until now, Team Wind Howl's lineup for the new season seemed to have surfaced. After 2 summers, this team had replaced their criminal partners. Their brawler and thief were still there, but their players were different. It would be hard to say if the old criminal air around the team would appear again. After Lin Feng transferred, another mid-level transfer came out. Liu Ying, Team Misty Rain's sharpshooter, the best 6th player. The 6th player was oftentimes the main sub in the team competition. The 6th player would sometimes be the person that would turn the situation around. However, at other times, the 6th player wouldn't appear on stage because their team's main 5 players smoothly defeated the opponents without the need for a 6th player. In any case, he was a skilled player. Liu Ying's transfer price of 4.6 million proved this point. In the end, Liu Ying transferred to Team Thunderclap. It was hard not to pay attention to this team. Team Thunderclap had been hard-pressed money for many years. Over their many years of existence, their biggest transfer was to get back their former core character, Life Extinguisher, from Excellent Era. It truly made people speechless. A 4.6 million transfer might not mean too much to some of the powerhouses, but for Team Thunderclap, it was no small sum of money. It looked like this team had quite the ambition this new season. Was it because of Xiao Shichen's and Life Extinguisher's return? Had Xiao Shichen found new growth from Excellent Era's defeat? Misty Rain sold their sharpshooter player entirely for the beautiful sisters Shuki and Shukexen to take position. They obviously didn't need to find any replacements. Adjustments had been made to the beautiful sisters' characters, which had been displayed last season. It looked like the new season would be their time to shine. Apart from that, various teams had a few transfers to fix up some minor patches. There were a few retirements and a few rookies selected for promotion. Overall, besides the huge changes from Excellent Era's disbandment, Fang Rui was the only core player to transfer. The other teams followed their usual path and firmly walked along it. Doubt. Wavering. Each year had 2 transfer windows. In reality, these windows were for teams to patch these up. Perhaps an issue popped up during the course of the season, but by the time the transfer window ended, the majority of teams would fix these and start walking again. They might be going at different paces, but every team was advancing forward. 2 months passed by in a flash. On 9/1, the transfer window closed. It also happened to be Monday, so the eSports Home gave a summary of this summer's transfers. There wasn't anything extremely shocking, but every team was moving towards a more steady direction. The transfer window had closed and the new season was about to begin. Each team began announcing their goals. The powerhouses naturally talked about winning the championships. They had the confidence and the strength to back their words. The vast majority of teams could only aim for the playoffs as their goal. They felt too embarrassed to claim that they would become the champions. As for the bottom-tier teams, their goal was to keep their spots. Even though not much attention was paid to them, they definitely had to achieve it. As for Happy, keep our spot and become the champions, Yishu posted on his Weibo. The following 2 comments were 2 orderly pair of ellipses. For a moment, everyone was speechless. They had heard of the saying, WatchOurWorldAudio.com. With second secured, strive for first, but keep our spot and become the champions. The 2 goals spoken were like the difference between heaven and earth. How could you say that? As soon as Yishu posted this Weibo, the players on the weak teams started livening up. Then our goal will also be to keep our spots and become the champions. Team Heavenly Swords Luke Warning was the team's boss, captain, and core player. Even if he didn't have any spectacular achievements, he was already destined to be a legend in the history of glory. He suddenly changed his Team Heavenly Swords goal. Soon afterwards, Parade and Radiant also changed their goals for fun. Seconded +1. Keep our spots and become the champions. This slogan suddenly became the most popular slogan this new season. The powerhouses wanted to cry. Striving to become the champions was supposed to be a grandiose and magnificent goal. With all these people inappropriately making a mess out of things, their goals no longer gave off the same feeling. In reality, the teams truly aiming to keep their spots didn't have the heart to joke around. Parade and Radiant shouldn't have much trouble keeping their spots, but they also didn't have much hope for making it to the playoffs. They were the kind that lacked pressure but also lacked motivation, so they could happily joke around. But according to one person, while these later teams might just be joking, was Happy joking? Placing the 2 extremely disparate goals of keeping their spots and being the champions together might be a sign of the uneasiness in the depths of their heart. Yeah, even I can't tell if Happy is strong or weak. It's too scary. Yishu unexpectedly replied to this person. God, Yishu has noticed me. He replied back. Quote, this person suddenly dissolved. He was a Yishu fan in the end. FCK, this Weibo commenter is pathetic. Commenter, stand up. Commenter, what happened? There were a few who cared about the question of Happy's strength. I think we'll know the answer soon. The Pro Alliance's official Weibo actually gave a reply. At the same time, the official Weibo released the new season's schedule for the first match. The Samsara vs Happy match was highlighted. Team Samsara, last season's champions. As per convention, the reigning champions would be arranged to play a newly joined team to show the disparity between them. And this newly joined team would be the one invited into the alliance. However, that was just an unwritten tradition, not an established rule. As a result, this season, the reigning champions would be facing Happy, the team that had advanced their way through the Challenger League. Team Miracle felt like crying. Truthfully speaking, the invited teams would usually be favored more than the Challenger League team because the teams that came from the Challenger League were usually the ones relegated from the previous seasons and then revived. Those teams weren't fresh at all. Only these invited teams would be truly new teams. However, Happy was an exception this time. They became the first truly new team that had successfully made their way through the Challenger League. Thus, it was a tragedy for the invited team this time. How could the attention towards them be higher than the attention towards Happy? In the end, the opportunity to have the first match with the reigning champions was given to Happy. Team Miracle wasn't so delusional to think that they could make a name for themselves by beating the reigning champions. However, it had always been a form of care from the Alliance towards the new team. It looked like the love was being given to Happy though. It was as if Team Miracle was stuck in their stepmother's home. Even more unfortunate for them was that Team Miracle mainly consisted of Team Excellent Era's old players. Being reduced to a new team and being beaten by Happy were not without a relationship. How could they not be having complicated feelings towards them? Samsara vs Happy might be the Alliance's most hyped welcoming match for a new team. How would this match turn out? From the pro circle to the player circle to the media to the masses, the discussion lasted for days up until 9/5 when the first match took place. The result, Team Samsara swept Team Happy with a clean 10-0. End chapter. The King's Avatar, Chapter 1139, Audio Source, WooshaWorldAudiobook.com. Chapter 1139, Feeling a Little Rusty. Translator, Nomiyami. Editor, Nomiyami. 10-0. A clean sweep. There was no outcome more tragic than this. The ones who disliked Happy were overjoyed. The ones who supported Happy felt worried. The harsher ones had already started trashing Happy, keep our spot and become the champions. Good luck on the first half of that. In reality, the newly joined team getting swept by the reigning champions was a common occurrence. Last season, Team Heavenly Swords had also been hyped up, but they returned with Big Zero as well. Of course, the hype towards Team Heavenly Swords and Team Happy were very different. In countless people's eyes, Happy wasn't a weak team. A team with 3 All-Stars was enough to qualify them to compete against any team in the Alliance. However, they were swept clean just like any other new team. It was truly too surprising. In the post-match press conference, the reporters had gathered, but the main guests hadn't arrived yet. The reporters had been quietly discussing this topic for quite a while now. This opening match usually wasn't given much attention. After all, it was a match between a strong team and a weak team. But this time, because of Happy, everyone thought it would be a match worth seeing. No one would have imagined that it would be no different than the opening matches of the past. Finally, Happy's players arrived at the press conference under the guidance of the staff. According to the Alliance's rules, at least 3 players need to attend the post-match press conference. They could come together or separately. It didn't matter. 4 players from Happy came out: Yishu, Sumuchung, Fang Rui, Steamed Bun. The 3 All-Stars had appeared. The reporters felt pleased but not satisfied. Everyone in Happy was a huge topic for discussion. The reporters hated how they couldn't have every member of Happy reply to their questions. Where's Team Blue Rain's former captain, a grandpa nearly 30, Wei Chen? Where's the beautiful rookie, Tang Ro? Where's the player who came from a champion team and changed classes, Qiao Yivan? Where's the punk who wasn't all that skilled yet dared to play the #1 most difficult class, a summoner? Where was that infamous scrap picker from the heavenly domain? Where was the cleric, who held an important position but was somewhat lacking? Get over here. Only then would their cravings be satisfied. There was no hope now though. When the 4 appeared, the reporters carefully read their expressions. They wanted to see how they were affected by this disastrous loss. However, all they saw were 4 calm and composed faces. Even Steamed Buns, this new rookie, was unperturbed. Speaking of which, this person had only participated for a brief moment in the final Challenger League press conference. No. He had cultivated such a professional aura that fast, in the blink of an eye, Happy's 4 players took their seats. The press conference began. Numerous reporters raised their hands. Yishu picked a random one. The person picked asked what everyone wanted to know. What your thoughts on being swept in your opening match? The reporter asked. I'm very calm, but you guys don't seem to be. It's a commonly seen outcome. What's there to panic about? Yishu asked back. Panic? We're not panicking. We're just excited about this subject, okay? The reporters silently criticized. The reporter that had been picked was stumped by this response though. The others could ridicule Yishu in their minds all they wanted, but it wasn't convenient for him to say. We were just excited because you guys got swept. Quote, he could only open his mouth and reply with an, in the past, new teams being swept by the reigning champions was a common occurrence. No. Our Happy has always stayed low profile, so of course it turned out the same as everyone else, Yishu said. I don't think there's ever been a new team that claimed that they would become the champions. You call that low profile? Quote, in the end, someone wasn't able to resist and stood up to fire back. You guys don't understand, Yishu said. When Team Heavenly Swords joined the alliance, they had originally wanted to become the champions too, but it was because of my advice that they stayed low profile. In the end, they didn't claim they would become the champions. This reply could be considered a mini-scoop. The reporters at the scene quickly passed this news on to their colleagues on the other side. Coincidentally, the other side was the post-match press conference for Heavenly Swords match. Team Heavenly Swords just happened to be sitting on stage too. The reporters, who received this information, were jumping with joy. Nothing noteworthy had happened and this press conference was about to end. Suddenly, everyone raised their hands in unison and waved it towards the front. This sudden commotion frightened Lu Guaning. Did he say something wrong? For a moment, Lu Guaning didn't dare call on a reporter and immediately recalled what he had just said. But after confirming several times that he had said nothing wrong, he very carefully picked a reporter at the front. This reporter was excited. He was talking before he even stood up. In Team Happy's press conference, God Yishu revealed that Team Heavenly Swords' goal last season had been to become the champions too. It was only because of his advice that you didn't. Is this true? Quote, this reporter was even having trouble finding the right words. Lu Guaning suddenly started to sweat. It got exposed. Become the champions. Heavenly Swords could only say it was a joke. If they actually said it was real, wouldn't they become the jokes? It's just a joke. That was only a joke. Lu Guaning immediately said, really? Then, when Heavenly Swords claimed that their goal would be to keep their spot and become the champions, could this be your ambitions showing? The reporter asked. WushOurWorldAudio.com. Every pro player has this kind of ambition, no? Lu Guaning regained his composure and started speaking confidently. It was just a small leak. How could he be stumped by something like this? At Happy's press conference, Yishu was currently talking. Speaking of which, hasn't the Alliance always arranged the other new team to challenge the champions? Why did they suddenly arrange for us to challenge the champions? This sudden change really caught us off guard. We thought we'd be playing against those old devils. Tyranny. Old devils. Aren't you one too? The reporters were sullen. They really wanted to fire back. However, what they wanted to say wasn't suitable for a place like a press conference. For the first time, the reporters felt like they were the disadvantaged group and could only watch as Yishu rambled on freely. They really wanted to interrupt, but it wouldn't be good to, so they could only stifle their frustration. So you're saying it's the Alliance's arrangements that led to Happy not performing ideally this round? The reporters could only word it in this way. I never said that. Yishu continued to evade the question. Then, what your thoughts on your own individual performance this match? Quote, a reporter asked. In the previous match, Yishu first came out in the group arena as the third player. He went up against Samsara's third player, Josekai, but lost. Afterwards, in the team competition, Samsara attacked even more ferociously. Happy wasn't able to hang on for very long. If you only took a look at Yishu's performance, it wasn't too bad. He didn't make any terrible mistakes, but there also weren't any particularly bright spots either. It's been too long since I've played a pro match. I was feeling a bit rusty. Yishu replied. What were they supposed to say? It was true that not competing in high-level league would have an impact on his condition, but he seemed quite fierce when he fought against Excellent Era. Was that a good reason? The reporters were doubtful. Their gazes shifted to Sumo-chan. Just when they were about to ask, she took the initiative to speak up. It's been too long since I've played a pro match. I was feeling a bit rusty. Sumo-chan had faced Samsara's vice-captain, Jiang Botao, but lost. A copy and paste. The reporters fumed. But the problem was that Sumo-chan had been relegated along with Excellent Era for a year. She hadn't played in a high-level league either. After serious consideration, Happy's reasoning held up. Their gazes shifted again. I haven't played a Chi Master in a long time. I was feeling a bit rusty. Fang Rui said. Okay, even though it was another copy-paste answer, it was definitely a legitimate reason. He transferred in the last third of June and switched to a Chi Master. It had only been a month since then. It was normal for him to not do too well in his first match with a new class. Fang Rui was the second player for the group arena. Samsara's Sun Xiang had been the first to come out. After Sun Xiang beat Happy's Tang Rou, he nearly completed a 1v2 and almost beat Fang Rui too. In the end, even though Fang Rui won, it didn't take long for him to lose the second round. He practically left two players for Yishu, and one of those was Josekai. Good joke. On the other hand, look at how sincere I am. Fang Rui said to Yishu after leaving the stage, and was met with a kick. The reporters received 3. I was feeling a bit rusty. Afterwards, they looked towards Happy's fourth player, Steamed Bun. He came out in the individual competition, but lost to Samsara's all-star grappler, Liu Boyuan. Steamed Bun had given quite a few frights to the enemy. For a new player, this loss could be considered as an honorable one. He could completely feel satisfied with his performance today. However, Steamed Bun looked at everyone and then immediately copied the previous 3's responses. I've never played in a pro match before. I was feeling a bit rusty. Fuck. What was that supposed to mean? Are you saying that if you weren't feeling rusty, you would have beaten Liu Boyuan? The others might have been away from the pro scene for too long or switched classes, so feeling rusty was possible, but you're a genuine rookie. What do you mean, rusty? You can't be rusty in the first place. Fuck. The reporters could only restrain their desire to curse at them. What an uncomfortable feeling. A few people had even left the venue with their hands against their hips. Those guys had probably left out of anger. What your thoughts on Happy's future this season? Quote, a reporter was determined to keep asking questions. Keep our spot and become the champions. Yishu said earnestly. Become the champions. Sumo-chan said. What else did I come here for? Fang Rui said. What happened to keeping our spot? We don't need it anymore. Steamed Bun saw that his two seniors had gotten rid of the key passport part and felt discontent. Becoming the champions implies that we'll have kept our spot. Fang Rui lectured Steamed Bun. Oh, that makes sense. Steamed Bun sighed. They couldn't take it any longer. The reporters felt defeated. They had at least found two things from this interview though. This sweep hadn't damaged Happy's morale. What's more, Fang Rui seemed to be meshing together well with Happy. At least personality-wise. End chapter. The King's Avatar, Chapter 1140, Audio source, WuxaWorldAudiobook.com. Chapter 1140, First Round. Translator, Nomyami. Editor, Nomyami. Happy may have been swept by Samsara, but they won versus the press conference reporters. After routing the reporters, the four left the stage in high spirits. When they left through the passageway for the players, they just happened to bump into Samsara, who would be participating in the next part of the press conference. Zhou Zekai, Jiang Botao, Sun Xiang. For the opening round and a good beginning, Samsara hadn't held back and had sent out their three all-stars. Even though Sun Xiang's year at Excellent Era had been a devastating failure, he was still young and people still looked highly upon his future. From this match, it could be seen that Sun Xiang was meshing well with Samsara. There was no point talking about the individual competition, but in the team competition, he had done a great job at assuming the responsibilities of an attacker. One Autumn Leaf in the front, Cloud Piercer in the back. The duo tore apart Happy's formation as if everyone in Happy was a dead branch. It was easy to foresee that this wouldn't be the only time the duo would go on a rampage. This duo would certainly become a nightmare in the entire alliance for a long time. Many reporters were already describing them in this way. Senior, quote, after bumping into Happy in the passageway, Samsara's Jiang Botao gave a polite greeting to Yishu. The winners would often console the losers. It seemed like Jiang Botao wanted to do the same. I'm glad to see how outstanding the younger generation is. Yishu sighed. Sun Xiang rolled his eyes. Because of this person, he had been put into a difficult situation. However, he had gained a lot of experience from these failures. But if it had to be said that he felt gratitude for Yishu beating him, Sun Xiang wasn't so sweet. He still wanted to ruthlessly crush him. In today's match, he had gone all out and Samsara had achieved a perfect victory. However, in his heart, he didn't feel like he had beaten Yishu. Was it because it wasn't a direct confrontation? Sun Xiang was somewhat puzzled. Before anyone in Samsara could reply, Fang Rui nodded his head. Yes, I'm glad to. Zhou Zekai stared at Fang Rui but didn't say anything. Aren't you and Little Joe both from the same generation? Jiang Botao laughed. Really? Who told him to always be so quiet? I forgot. Fang Rui said. Pro players should speak with their play. Jiang Botao said. Okay, I'll give a good talk with you guys next time. Fang Rui said. See you next time. See you next time. The two sides departed after a brief exchange. Samsara's press conference went more like how an opening round press conference should go. Most of the discussion was focused on the goals for the new season. Their new player Sun Xiang was given a lot of attention and was asked about his thoughts on Samsara and how he was fitting in with the team. The four passed through the player passageway and returned to the guest team's lounge at Samsara Stadium. They didn't take a moment to sit down and take a break. They pushed open the door and called out to the others inside. Let's go. Happy left Samsara Stadium and returned to City H with their 0 points. Saying that they didn't care at all about the 0 points obviously wasn't possible. On the plane, Chen Guo was just sitting and she wasn't feeling comfortable. She looked at Su Mucheng, who was seated next to her, and wanted to chat, but then she saw that Su Mucheng was looking at the tablet in Ye Xiu's hands. "What's he watching?" Chen Guo asked curiously. "The VOD for the match that just ended," Su Mucheng said. "Oh." Chen Guo didn't say anything more. Happy wasn't the only one playing their first match. Happy was already on their way back home. The matches going on in the other stadiums had already ended as well. Team Miracle, the other new team alongside Team Happy, hadn't received the champion sweep. Instead, they had been swept by Team Tyranny. Truthfully speaking, Team Miracle wasn't that bad. They had joined when Team Excellent Era disbanded. Seizing this opportunity, they had fished up quite a few things, including 3 of Team Excellent Era's players. In terms of their players, Team Miracle was actually superior to last season's Team Heavenly Swords. Unfortunately, apart from some leftovers from Team Excellent Era, Team Miracle didn't bring anything fresh to the alliance, so the attention received was less than that of last year's Team Heavenly Swords. Speaking of Team Heavenly Swords, their announcement that Sun Jieping would be returning and joining their team had led to a heated discussion. After all, the last time they checked, Sun Jieping had been with Happy in the Challenger League. Everyone thought that he would return along with Happy. Who would have thought that he would turn around and run to Team Heavenly Swords? For Heavenly Swords' opening match, they happened to be matched with 100 Blossoms. First, it was Zhang Jiale. Then, it was Sun Jieping. 100 Blossoms' 2 kings had retired then returned, but neither of them chose to go back to their team. When Zhang Jiale returned, the fans cried and cursed, unable to understand and accept it. As for Sun Jieping, when he had fought with Happy in the Challenger League, people had foreseen this development. However, Sun Jieping had been away from the scene for a long time now. The sentiment towards him had lessened drastically. What's more, when he returned, he had been in the Challenger League, so everyone felt like he wasn't being too serious about it and was just having some fun. On the other hand, Zhang Jiale had returned and joined Tyranny. It was obvious that he had gone over because of their fame. In comparison, Sun Jieping's return truly didn't set off any big waves. There was still some noise though. The reporters also knew that this could be considered a noteworthy topic. As a result, in the press conference, someone tossed out this question. Sun Jieping's return didn't unfold as magnificently as Zhang Jiale's, but Sun Jieping himself was a lot fiercer than Zhang Jiale. When he was asked, "Why did you choose Heavenly Swords and not 100 Blossoms?" his reply was just 3 words, "I wanted to." Everything there was to know about Sun Jieping's situation had pretty much been uncovered when he had been with Happy. Everyone already knew that his hand injury wasn't fully healed. He could play, but he couldn't play for long. He was incapable of becoming a pro team's main force. Thus, many smart people had already guessed why Sun Jieping chose to go to Heavenly Swords. He clearly had an appropriate reason that everyone could understand, but instead, he gave this 3-word reply. "I wanted to," indicated that he wasn't going to give an explanation. This was just how Sun Jieping was. His hand injury meant that he could never become a true pro player again, but he himself hadn't changed. In the match between 100 Blossoms and a Heavenly Swords, 100 Blossoms 8-1-2. Heavenly Swords had won 2 points in the individual competition, one of which had been gotten by Sun Jieping. Many people felt it was regrettable. It had been many years since he had left the pro scene, yet even with an injury, he could still perform to such a level. If he hadn't gotten his injury, what status would Sun Jieping have in the current pro scene? Unfortunately, there were no ifs in this world. Apart from that, the opening round had 7 other matches. There weren't too many particularly noteworthy confrontations. This was also how the Pro Alliance always arranged the league schedule. It was the opening round. Satisfying the fans' curiosity towards the team's adjustments during the summer was enough. They didn't need to set up anything special. Watch OurWorldAudio.com. 7 matches. Team Blue Rain beat Team Bright Green 9-1. Team Tiny Herb swept Team Lightly 10-1. Team Windhowl beat Team Conquering Clouds 9-1. Team Misty Rain beat Team Seaside 8-2. Team Void barely beat Team 301 6-4. Team Thunderclap beat Team Parade 7-3. Team Royal Style beat Team Radiant 7-3. There were no surprises. The teams that should have won. The teams that should have lost. Although, in regards to the competitive format, with everyone vying for points, there wasn't technically a win or lose. However, out of habit, everyone still considered the team with more points as the winner and the other team as the loser for every match. From this first round, the placings were currently Tyranny, Samsara, and Tiny Herb tied for first with 10 points. Windhowl and Blue Rain tied for fourth with 9 points. Misty Rain at sixth with 8 points. Royal Style and Thunderclap tied for seventh with 7 points. In last were obviously the 3 teams that hadn't won a single point: Happy, Miracle, and Lightly. Team Lightly was a mid-tier team in the Alliance, neither good nor bad and rather invisible. Author's note: yes, very invisible. It wasn't until I officially started writing about the Pro League did I realize that there was still one team missing out of 20. And thus, Team Lightly was born. If they matched against a powerhouse, losing badly was nothing surprising. As for Happy and Miracle, the Alliance's tradition continued. Who had these two face against the finalists last season? These 3 teams all had 0 points, but Happy was thrown to the bottom. Unfortunately, placings were done by points and then by reverse alphabetical order. Happy started with the letter H, which came before Miracle's M and Lightly's L. Season 10's opening round ended with these results. It was hard to predict how this season would go based on these results though. It was just that Happy, the team that had been hyped, was swept by Samsara, so Happy was once again an unfathomable mystery. Was Happy a good team or a bad team? The media was discussing this question. The players were discussing this question. But all of them were simply outsiders in the scene. The ones with the headache were the Alliance's teams. They were the ones who need to rack their brains to figure out how they should be looking at Happy. Each team found something from the VOD of Happy vs Samsara. This information was too precious. In general, there were practically no recordings of Happy against high skill level. Only last year's match versus Happy could be considered as one. As soon as they started studying Happy, all of the teams realized that there were many things need to be studied. Not only did Happy have a bunch of rookies, even among the 3 old veterans, they were only sort of familiar with Sumuchung. The other 2 had switched classes. Since they had started again from scratch, it meant that the teams need to start up their research on him from scratch too. It was a bit better for Fang Rui. There were footsteps to follow. However, Yizhu made him feel nauseated. Unspecialized. Everyone knew what an unspecialized was. They knew the theory behind one and could train one too. But the problem was that they didn't have a Myriad Manifestations umbrella. An unspecialized without the Myriad Manifestations umbrella was completely different from an unspecialized with one. They had no way of testing an unspecialized themselves, nor could they imitate one. Their only source of information was from match VODs. There were really only 2 matches significant enough to watch though, so they could only watch these over and over again. Yishu was clearly someone that everyone was incomparably familiar with, but he was a completely mystery right now. This sort of feeling didn't feel good at all. You bastard. You've already retired, so why'd you have to return? If you're going to return, why'd you switch classes? If you're going to switch classes, why'd you have to choose an unspecialized? If you're going to choose an unspecialized, why'd you have to have an exclusive weapon? End chapter. The King's Avatar, Chapter 1141. Which match to watch? Audio source, WuxaWorldAudiobook.com. Chapter 1141. Which match to watch? Translator, Nomiyami. Editor, Nomiyami. In the eyes of the pro teams, Happy was a troublesome existence. In the past, when had they ever need to spend so much effort studying a new alliance team? Those teams on the border of relegations were no different than cheerleader teams in the eyes of the powerhouses. However, for Happy, they felt uneasy not taking him seriously. Fortunately, matches were played one by one. Over the entire season, each team would at most bump into Happy twice. The teams scheduled far from Happy weren't in a rush. On the other hand, the teams scheduled closer to Happy were rather worried, such as Team 100 Blossoms, who would be playing Happy next. Team 100 Blossoms had made it to the playoffs last season and even gave quite the trouble to Team Tyranny. After waving goodbye to Blood and Blossoms, the team became better and better. Yufeng, the new generation's #1 berserker, stood firm in Team 100 Blossoms. His strength had erased Sun Zheping's influence to some extent. Along with the passing of time, Team 100 Blossoms had been rather indifferent about encountering Sun Zheping. At least, they hadn't been as nervous as facing Happy. Because 100 Blossoms was a team on the fringe of the playoff level. It was very possible that a slight slip would lead to their playoff spot being taken, so in their view, Happy was an especially worrisome opponent. The difference in points this round might determine which of the two teams would be making into the playoffs. However, no matter how diligent they might be, there were only two real matches of Happy to look at. In their match against Excellent Era, Happy had displayed closely interlinked and masterful strategic planning, but against Samsara, before Happy could even get their tactics going, Samsara had scattered them. Samsara is even stronger this season, Team 100 Blossoms cleric, Mo Chuchen, said. But soon afterwards, under the gazes of everyone else in the team, Mo Chuchen shifted topics in a fluster. Focus on Happy. Focus on Happy. Yes, he had mistaken what was important here. But the problem was that there really wasn't much to see from Happy this match. Happy hadn't been able to display any of their tactics before collapsing. In the post-match press conference, Happy threw the word rustiness left and right, leading to a complete collapse of the reporters. But from Team 100 Blossom's careful analysis, they felt like this rustiness might really be the truth. Samsara had won 2 consecutive championships. Their strength didn't need to be questioned. Their team was an aggressive team, especially after the addition of Sun Xiang and One Autumn Leaf. With such strong attackers, their tempo only quickened. As a result, when Happy ran into Samsara, from their performance in the team competition, they indeed had been overwhelmed by Samsara's fast pace. Happy's decisions were always a half beat too slow. Even though they tried hard to make adjustments to their tactical rhythm, by the time they finished adjusting, Samsara was already on the next beat. After all, Samsara was different than Excellent Era. Excellent Era was a team that Yishu understood all too well. When fighting against Excellent Era, his tactics were clearly targeted towards them. Excellent Era had also been crushing noobs in the Challenger League for an entire year, so they had somewhat fallen from the pace of the pro scene. How could they compare to the reigning champions? Happy need to adapt to the pace of the pro matches. For 100 Blossoms, this was undoubtedly good news. Thus, the general direction of this upcoming match was more or less confirmed now. Fight Fast. 100 Blossoms players reached a consensus. As for the specifics, each team had their own class compositions and styles. For the following week, they would be undergoing targeted practice for utilizing this playstyle. This was the pro scene. This was a pro match. How each battle played out depended on the opponents. The week passed quickly. The second round of the league had begun. In this round, there were two important matches. The first was between Team Happy and Team 100 Blossoms. Everyone had been discussing how strong Happy was exactly over the course of the week. The other match was between Team Thunderclap and Team Void. After CO Shichen returned to Thunderclap, there had been a few more adjustments made during the summer transfer window, revealing the team's newfound ambition. As for Void, their dual Ghost Blades were legendary, but this duo always gave people a feeling that these two weren't able to support the general picture. However, people saw room for growth from Void, not from transfers but from the interior. Last season, Blue Rain's rookie Lu Hanwen shined. In his first year in the Alliance, he had been chosen as an all-star. Another star was rising. In the end, the best rookie went unsurprisingly to Lu Hanwen. However, was this decision truly without controversy? For Team Void's fans, that was absolutely not the case. Last season, a formidable rookie had appeared in their team too. An Exorcist, GEKG. GEKG was 19 this year. No matter how it was looked at, he was at an age brimming with youth. However, placed among pro players in a competitive scene getting younger and younger. Compared to the 15-year-old Lu Hanwen, the 19-year-old GEKG was immediately labeled with traits such as mature and staid, words that didn't suit youths. GEKG was indeed a serious person with an air of a great general. Alongside Glory's famous Ghostblade duo, he displayed a terror never before seen in a rookie. His performance was always consistent. Even though the Ghostblade duo was still the core of Team Void, the air of a leading role appeared around him. This wasn't him trying to overtake his seniors. It was simply his playstyle. He was someone with the potential to become the core of a team, a person that could carry the team's banner. Everyone had always been waiting for a good helper to the Ghostblade duo, but right now, a youth, who sometimes made the Ghostblade duo change from lead to support, had appeared. The two seniors seemed to have no disagreements towards him. And whenever Team Void's GEKG performed spectacularly, they always obtained good results. For this type of player, even if he didn't grow to become the core of a team, he would still be a great general in a team. It was just a pity that his seriousness made him different than Lu Hanwen, who was brimming with energy and passion. The attention towards him was far less. WatchOurWorldAudio.com. Team Void had always been lamenting at this injustice. In the selection for Best Rookie, Lu Hanwen snatched away the majority of the votes, leaving a huge gap between the second-place GEKG. This didn't affect GEKG though. Another summer had passed and he became even more mature. Last season, he had been the new rookie of the team and now he had already become a player that Team Void couldn't lack. The opening round of the league further proved this point. In the opening round, Team Void fought against Team 301 in a bitter battle. In this round, GEKG had been crucial to the points won by Team Void. He had won a point in the individual competition. In the team competition, Team 301 took the initiative but he stood firm and led the team for a counter-attack, resulting in a huge victory. In the post-match press conference, Team 301's captain, Yang Kong, praised GEKG. He even said that GEKG reminded him of Wang GXC despite their playstyles being entirely different. Afterwards, Team 301's all-star grappler Li Yihui, who had once been a part of Team Tiny Her but had been traded for Team 301's Zhu Bin, also expressed his approval towards his captain's praise for GEKG. Team Thunderclap vs Team Void was the match chosen to be broadcast. Even though everyone's curiosity towards Happy hadn't been erased, the broadcast could only choose a single match. They couldn't only broadcast Happy's matches this season, no. On 9/12, the second round of the Glory Professional League's 10th season started. The viewers tuning in to watch saw Team Void's stadium as scheduled. But the commentator Pan Lin seemed to be even more uneasy than anyone else. Hello friends, this is the second round of the Glory Professional League's 10th season, Thunderclap vs Void. The players on both sides have entered the stadium. First up will be the individual competitor, of course. And at the same time, there's another important match between 100 Blossoms and Happy, which is taking place in City H. I'm sure everyone knows that after Excellent Era was defeated in the Challenger League last season, the boss Tao Xuan sold practically all of Excellent Era's assets. Many people probably thought that Excellent Era's competitive stadium was a part of these assets. But in reality, Excellent Era Stadium used to be called Seocean Gymnasium, a public gymnasium in City H. When the Glory Professional League was established, the competitors soon need this type of venue, so Excellent Era rented it for a long-term use. Later on, the name was changed to the Excellent Era Stadium. The lease was suspended AEAD of time and the stadium has returned to the original Seocean Gymnasium. Right now, Happy is temporarily leasing it for their stadium. In truth, this isn't surprising. This is the only venue in City H with the conditions to display Glory's projection technology. Quote. A cough interrupted Pan Lin's introduction. After a pause, Pan Lin realized that he was currently commentating the match between Thunderclap and Void, but after only a short introduction, he had suddenly shifted focus to Happy. The director had told him to give updates on the situation between Happy and 100 Blossoms. It would be enough to just say a few words when a result came out. He wasn't supposed to go too far though. Let's get back to the scene. Pan Lin immediately pulled the subject back from Seocean Gymnasium. His old partner Li Yibo gave a loud laugh. It looks like our little Pan has quite the interest in the match between 100 Blossom and Happy. We'll be giving updates on that match from time to time. Pan Lin said. Okay, the match between Thunderclap and Void will be starting soon. First up is the individual competitor. The first two players to come up will be Thunderclap's Dai Yankee and Void's Li Zun. Pan Lin started focusing on the present match, and at the same time, standing inside the venue renamed to Seocean Gymnasium, Yi Shu let out a deep sigh. Even though the name had changed, the venue itself hadn't. The only addition to it was equipment for the projection technology. I'm back, a year and 8 months to stand back here. My name has changed. My character has changed, but my will to compete will never change. I'll be going. Yi Shu called out to his teammates and stepped towards the stage. Dai Yankee has open-fired. For now, Li Zun is unable to approach and is moving around. A beautiful air jump. He jumped backwards in mid-air to dodge the magic coming at him. Happy sent out Yi Shu as their first player. The viewers tuning into the match were listening to Pan Lin commentating the intense battle between Elementalist and Assassin, when a piece of news about Happy suddenly popped up out of nowhere. End chapter. The King's Avatar, Chapter 1142. A Nervous Rookie. Audio source, WuxaWorldAudiobook.com. Chapter 1142, A Nervous Rookie. Translator, Nomiya-me. Editor, Nomiya-me. Yi Xiu was the first one to walk onto the stage for Happy. Pan Lin was not the only one who was shocked. Everyone in the stadium, including the players from Team 100 Blossoms, were astonished. According to the usual practices, the ace player would appear in the group arena to fight for the 2 points. The ace player rarely appeared in the individual competition. With Happy's arrangements, was Happy giving up on the group arena, targeting the 3 points in the individual competition? There was no need to dwell on this thought. The list of names for the matches was set before the game. Zheng Xinran from Team 100 Blossoms went on stage for this away game. Who was Zheng Xinran? Before this match, no one knew. He was a rookie promoted from the 100 Blossoms training camp this season. When his name was submitted to the league in the new season's players list, it could be considered as his first public appearance in the circle. After that, he appeared eSport Home's September 1st edition, introducing the team rosters for the Alliance's 20 teams. All officially registered appeared in this list. Important transfers would have short introductions, but Zheng Xinran only had his name listed and popped up on 100 Blossoms team roster just like this. No press conference had been convened for him, so no reporters thought about interviewing him. He was not a rookie who had gained the adoration of millions, but the team gave him a chance because of his skill. He became an official player and waited for the chance to appear on stage. Then, he would use his play to earn a name for himself in the league. 100 Blossom didn't send him up for the opening match, so he sat idly on the bench. However, he wasn't annoyed. Unless he was one of those so-called heavenly talents, this was something almost all rookies had to experience, even more so in Team 100 Blossoms. They had watched his player came out of their training camp, sign a contract with them, and sit on the bench. He found opportunities here and there. He gradually became a part of the main roster, then the core of the team, then a god in the Alliance. Tang Hao. For every rookie sitting on the benches, there was nothing more encouraging than Tang Hao's story. Zheng Xinran inherited DeLillo, the brawler account Tang Hao left behind when he left 100 Blossoms. He promised himself that he would be like Tang Hao and conquer the world, starting from the bench. He was able to get a chance to fight in their second round. For someone who knew Tang Hao's story very well, he knew that he had gained an opportunity even earlier than Tang Hao. This fact raised his spirits. He was moved and excited and didn't even sleep well last night. He could finally step onto the stage. Unfortunately, his opponent just had to be Yi Xiu. Who didn't know of Yi Xiu's accomplishments in the early days? New rookies didn't feel too pressured facing him though. This was because that era of glory was too far in the past. Only players who had played Glory for over 10 years had the chance to personally witness that era. Zheng Xinyan obviously hadn't played Glory for that long. By the time he started playing Glory and entered 100 Blossoms training camp, Yi Xiu had already been labeled as outdated. Not long afterwards, he retired. When he returned, Excellent Era disbanded. Zheng Xinran indeed admired the amount of commotion this god could make, but he only started to learn about Yi Xiu's skill when his team was preparing to fight Happy. Like everyone else, he only knew about the unspecialized and the myriad manifestations umbrella in theory, but not much in actual practice. Team 100 Blossoms had been distressed for this very reason. However, Zheng Xinran was relatively at ease because he didn't think he would have the opportunity to fight Yi Xiu. He would be appearing in the individual competition, so the team competition was irrelevant. He didn't expect to meet Happy's core and god in the individual competition. However, what he didn't think would happen happened. He was a rookie who would playing in his first competitive match in his professional career. Unfortunately, he just had to face a god who had fought hundreds of battles. The thunderous applause given to Yi Shu in the stadium caused half of Zheng Xinran's body to go numb. He realized that competition wasn't as simple as he had imagined. Why did he feel so suffocated in such a big stadium? Happy was a new team that had only recently entered the league, yet they already had so many fans. So noisy. Zheng Xinran entered the player booth. The player booth was completely cut off from the outside world. However, his brain was still in a mess. The amount of noise and the feeling of suffocation lingered in his mind, and he was unable to wipe it away. 1 minute had passed. Yi Shu pressed ready after logging on with Lord Grimm and joining the arena room. However, there was no sign of activity from Zheng Xinran. What happened? The crowd became restless, so the referee immediately took action to see what was up with Zheng Xinran. Then, he saw a player whose body was completely rigid and tense. It was pressure. The referee was experienced and this wasn't the first time he had encountered such a situation. He only needed to glance at the player to tell that he was too nervous. "Are you ready?" The referee sighed and knew the player was definitely not prepared, but the match couldn't give him limitless time to prepare. He could only confirm with this method. If he was ready, then the match would start at once. If not, then he would forfeit. Zheng Xinran obviously knew the rules, so he immediately nodded. Under the guidance of the referee, he logged on, entered the room with his character, and pressed ready. They soon reached the end of the countdown. Both Lord Grimm and DeLillo loaded into the map. DeLillo was the character Tang Hao had previously used. When he had been present, 100 Blossoms made an effort to upgrade it. But after his departure, 100 Blossom went back to their old Berserker and Spitfire combo. DeLillo was no longer an account the club focused on. After the level 75 update, DeLillo naturally wasn't a priority. Now that the account had been handed down to a rookie, the majority of the equipment was still as Tang Hao had left it. Upgrades in the equipment were made through upgraded level 75 orange equipment instead of upgraded level 75 silver equipment. In comparison, Happy's character weakness wasn't so obvious before DeLillo. Lord Grimm's Myriad Manifestation Umbrella was at level 70. Even though he didn't have any other silver equipment, a full set of level 75 orange equipment was enough to compare with silver equipment at level 70. As for character player suitability, in reality, only the powerhouses had the resources to be so picky. The moment Yi Shu entered the room, he had Lord Grimm's Sprint AEAD. As for Zheng Xinran, he was still in a daze. He didn't do anything and was still trying to sort out his emotions. The audience didn't know about Zheng Xinran's situation. All they saw was that the old general was charging forward impatiently, while the rookie calmly stood his ground. Had those two switched accounts? The audience didn't know about Zheng Xinran's situation, neither did Yi Shu. Yi Shu didn't have any way to learn about such a new rookie, so he could only learn as the match progressed. However, when Lord Grimm reached the center of the map, he didn't see his opponent. Is he moving strategically? For any pro player, this observation was instinctive. Yi Shu immediately looked over the terrain. This was a home game for Happy, so they picked the map themselves. Even if he closed his eyes, he wouldn't walk the wrong way on this map. He immediately took note of any locations that were possible for a sneak attack, but he couldn't sense any movement from the opponent. Is he playing dirty? WatchOurWorldAudio.com. Yi Shu wondered. The brawler was a class that could play dirty, so Yi Shu took caution and carefully looked around. He had Lord Grimm move AEAD while deliberately making mistakes. No response. Zheng Xinran from 100 Blossom was still trying to regain his composure at the spawn point, so he hadn't moved. Even if the audience watched from a bird's eye view, none of them knew what was happening. Those who had watched Happy's matches in the Challenger League sent glacés towards Wei Chen at Happy's bench. Playing dirty by standing at the spawn point was similar to this old player. Happy had once used this tactic against their opponents. Was this retribution for Happy? If this was the Challenger League, the audience might have been a bit excited, but this was different. This was an official league match, as well as a home game for Happy. Even though their popularity couldn't be compared with the early years of Excellent Era, it was definitely enough for the bottom tier and mid-tier teams be jealous of. Having a large audience meant that a lot of people bought tickets. This was probably where teams earned most of their day-to-day income from. At this home game, Happy's fans started to feel a little worried. They were afraid of the strange moves this foreign rookie from 100 Blossoms would make. The atmosphere in the stadium started to grow heavy. Everyone watched Lord Grimm gradually get closer to DeLillo while the latter was calm as always. At last, the two characters appeared in each other's view. Yishu saw DeLillo, and Zheng Xinran saw Lord Grimm. After that, DeLillo charged forward. He sprinted straight without showing any signs of turning. There was no touch of tactics as he advanced straight AEAD as if this was the deciding point. He must be scheming something. The audience thought to themselves. If this were really the deciding point in the match, what was he doing earlier? Was he just standing there to nurture his strength while exhausting the enemy? Frankly speaking, that wasn't possible in Glory. Many players would do random ineffective actions before they encountered their opponent as warm-up. There must be some sort of scheme within all this for Zheng Xinran to just wait there doing nothing. It was just like what Wei Chen had done at Happy. The audience didn't have time to think any further because the two had started fighting already. 100 Blossoms Zheng Xinran, a schemer in everyone's minds, was sent flying backgrounds in the first exchange. The audience was stunned, and Yishu was also a bit astonished. He had been 120% careful, and had numerous variations and follow-ups prepared after Falling Flower Palm, but it turned out that Falling Flower Palm was all it took to send him flying away. As for his follow-up, Lord Grimm missed when he struck with his spear. This was a rare mistake for veterans like Yishu. It was simply because that palm hitting was too surprising. The moment DeLillo was about to reach the ground after being blown away, his body twitched and he lay flat on the ground. What is he doing? Yishu was dumbstruck. To even fail to quick recover, was he really a pro player? Even Yishu was slightly dazed. He was playing in a pro match, right? He wasn't in the arena or the Challenger League, torturing scrubs, right? Is it a trap? Yishu didn't move forward and instead used long-range skills. After a chain of ferocious attacks, his heart finally steadied. It was impossible for this to be trap. If it was, then this was way overboard. The player before him was simply playing really bad for some reason. Lord Grimm rushed forward without any hesitation. He dispatched his opponent cleanly and won. The audience was dumbstruck. They even forgot to applaud and cheer for their team. What happened? This victory was too simple. Was 100 Blossoms deliberately playing badly? End chapter.
The King's Avatar, Chapter 1143. An Ordinary Veteran. Audio source, WuXiaWorldAudiobook.com. Chapter 1143. An Ordinary Veteran. Translator, Gnome Yummy. Editor, Gnome Yummy. Zheng Xinran wasn't the first rookie to lose a battle because of nerves, nor would he be the last. But no rookie would ever want their very first battle to have such an embarrassing ending. This was the very first point obtained by Happy in the Pro League, a memorable point won by Yishu. The story stopped there, though, since there was nothing memorable about the process of winning the point. This wasn't a match to be proud of. Somehow, Happy won the point just like that. Aside from the judge, who had seen with his own eyes how nervous Sung Jinrin was, the only others who could really understand what had happened were his 100 Blossom teammates. Others didn't know anything about Sung Jinrin, but his teammates understood his skill very well. After all, he was sent out for this official match because he had the skill necessary to possibly achieve a win. But in the end, his performance didn't suit his actual abilities at all. The 100 Blossoms players thought, and immediately knew that he had been too nervous. It was common to be nervous, but strange to be nervous to this extent. But they couldn't put more pressure on Sung Jinrin after this. When he came off stage, his teammates spoke words of comfort and encouragement to him until the judge called for the second individual competitor to go on stage. Zhang Wei, an ordinary name that couldn't get any more ordinary, just like his professional career. Zhang Wei was a veteran player. After debuting in Season 3, he had played continuously for Team 100 Blossoms. He wasn't particularly talented, nor did he show any sort of breakthrough growth. Through the years, he was just another ordinary member of 100 Blossoms. He had seen Blood and Blossoms wreak havoc upon the Alliance. He had seen Sun Zheping's tragic injury and untimely retirement. He had seen Dong Jiali alone but still persevering in the fight. He had seen Tang Hao's rapid rise from a benchwarmer to a god at the peak of the Alliance. All of this took place right beside him, and he experienced it all, yet hadn't changed afterwards. In the end, he was just a very ordinary member of 100 Blossoms. There were actually many pro players like this. They weren't very eye-catching, and they wouldn't often come up in the media or in conversations between ordinary gamers. However, they were still a very important component of the Alliance. It was just like how, in real life, the majority of people were just ordinary people. Pro players were an extraordinary subset of glory players, and Zhang Wei and the others were the most ordinary of this subset. The second player in the individual competition for 100 Blossoms Away match at Happy was this ordinary player, Zhang Wei. Zhang Wei went on stage, entered the player booth, swiped his account card, logged into the game, and joined the match room. He had repeated this process many times over the years and so didn't need any sort of preparation. To him, it was as simple as eating a meal. Soon after entering the room, he saw his opponent enter, Steamed Bun Invasion. Oh, it's that confusing player. Zhang Wei thought back to the research they had done prior to this match. This player named Bao Rongxing had earned that evaluation. This guy, he had good technical skill for sure, but his performance in matches was sometimes good and sometimes bad. If that were his only problem, they could just treat him as a player whose condition was unstable. But this guy, sometimes his good would become bad, and sometimes his bad would miraculously produce good. His play followed no rules, and so it was impossible to devise any tactics to counter him. In the end, the plan was just 4 words: play it by ear. And now the task of playing by ear had fallen upon Zhang Wei's head. Countdown. Loading match. Zhang Wei's character was a witch called Endless Forest. Although he was an ordinary player, he had played in 100 Blossoms for many years now, and his position was relatively stable, so his character Endless Forest was fairly good. Of course, it couldn't compare to Valkyria. Zhang Wei had debuted the same year as Wang Jiexi and played the same class, but his name was never mentioned with Wang Jiexi's, because in people's eyes there was nothing to compare. Zhang Wei used this decent witch, Endless Forest. The strategy of this match was to play by ear, so Zhang Wei's original plan was to open with strategic change of position. But the map that Happy had chosen was simple and flat. With no cover, there was no way to surprise the opponent, so he had no choice but to directly charge forward. Steamed Bun didn't hesitate at all. As soon as the match started, he brazenly charged out, at the same time sending a message. Let's decide the winner. Alright. Upon seeing the opponent's message, Zhang Wei sent a reply. Soon enough, without dodging, or rather with nowhere to dodge, the two players met at the center of the map. Both Brawler and Witch were close to mid-range fighters, but the Witch's range of control was a bit larger. As a mage, the Witch absolutely had to have some sort of AoE. Zhang Wei's actions were extremely simple. Endless Forest tossed a lava flask, which was the most common opening move for witches in PvP. Throw a lava flask, it didn't matter if you burned the opponent, just limit their movements. If they didn't want to suffer damage from the lava, they could only go around. Okay, he's jumping over here. The lava flask instantly turned the area into a field of lava, but Steam Bun Invasion leapt into the air. With a powerful Nia attack, half jumping half attacking, he continued straight towards Endless Forest. He managed to avoid the lava flask this way, but this kind of attack was just too reckless. Endless Forest stepped to the side, and with a wave of his sleeve, a dark purple shadow flew out. It was the Witch skill Night Cloak, which could grab, and because it had a higher priority than Nia attack, the grab could not be avoided with this skill. The mid-air Steamed Bun Invasion looked like he crashed right into the Night Cloak, and he was immediately bound by the shadows and fell into the lava. But Zhang Wei wouldn't let him get away with just that amount of damage. Endless Forest raised his broom and prepared to launch further attacks, only to see something small flying toward him and steadily growing larger. In an instant it filled his field of view, and he was hit by the brick. When was this brick thrown? Zhang Wei didn't know, but he was sure that it was before his Night Cloak, otherwise it would have been interrupted by the Night Cloak's grab. And now, the brick had hit him and interrupted his attack, while the binding effect of Night Cloak had worn off already. Steam Bun Invasion was in the lava, and although he was taking damage, it didn't affect his movements. Tyrannical Chain Punch. Zhang Wei immediately wanted to have Endless Forest to dodge, but it was already too late. Steam Bun Invasion was right in front of him. He got up and turned over, ignoring the lava's damage and coming with a ruthless hammering blow. Zhang Wei would suffer in this exchange, but he didn't really understand Steam Bun Invasion's usage of Tyrannical Chain Punch right now. Although this was a fierce attack, there were no good follow-up skills. It would make more sense to first use some smaller attacks to pave the way, then finish the combo with a Tyrannical Chain Punch. But Steam Bun Invasion was decisive, directly using the final step and leaving it at that. Right, leaving it at that. After the Tyrannical Chain Punch, Steam Bun Invasion rolled backward and retreated. This was the motion prescribed by the system at the end of this skill and was unavoidable. Of course, Endless Forest, who had just been battered by the Tyrannical Chain Punch, wouldn't be able to counterattack in such a short period of time. Otherwise, this attack would just become a skill where after it was used the player would be forced to suffer an attack. WuxiaWorldAudio.com. So after this, the two characters stood up at almost the same time, and tossed out items at the same time. Steam Bun Invasion used Sand Toss, while Endless Forest used a Disperse Powder. If the opponent had any buffs, the Disperse Powder would get rid of them, and if they didn't, then the Disperse Powder would reduce their speed. The two scattered materials intersected in midair and continued toward their targets, neither affecting the other. Because they were close to each other and were both attacking, neither had time to dodge, and they were both struck at the same time. Steam Bun Invasion's movements instantly became slower, and Endless Forest had been a little late in turning his camera, so the sand toss reached his face. His field of view turned black. Being blind didn't mean that you couldn't move, so Zhang Wei immediately had Endless Forest to jump backward. The blind effect from Sand Toss didn't last very long, while the effects of Disperse Powder would last a solid 10 seconds. After the blind wore off, he would still have plenty of time to counterattack. Zhang Wei hopped backwards in darkness, but while doing so suddenly felt like his character had been hit by something. After seeing the status effect appear, he was startled. Wasn't this the lowered speed effect caused by Disperse Powder? Tooth for tooth. Jiang Wei immediately knew that Steamed Bun had used this skill before his disperse powder, which allowed him to secretly learn the disperse powder skill. But as to why Steamed Bun activated Tooth for Tooth, Jiang Wei couldn't understand at all. Even though the events had already passed and disperse powder had been stealthily learned, Jiang Wei still couldn't understand why he would make such a move. Using such a powerful attack and then a disperse powder just pulled their speeds to the same level. He hadn't established any sort of advantage. While he was confused, the blind wore off and his vision recovered, only for him to see Steamed Bun Invasion charging toward him. There was still a large distance between them. How would Jiang Wei let himself be attacked easily? He saw Steamed Bun Invasion raise his hand in preparation to throw something. And he was prepared to dodge, but he quickly saw that the direction in which he had raised his hand was simply too far off target. What direction is that? Jiang Wei turned his camera to see where Steamed Bun Invasion had thrown that mist poison needle, and then suddenly, there was a clunk at the back of his head. He was hit by a brick, knocked dizzy. Brick. Where did it come from? Jiang Wei didn't know, but he had been blind for a moment, so Steamed Bun Invasion must have used that time to find the right angle to pull it out. But Steamed Bun Invasion of course wouldn't run around behind him to throw the brick. After all, he couldn't teleport. This brick had originally been thrown at him almost head-on. The blind on Jiang Wei had worn off, but while he had still been fuzzy, Steamed Bun had come up with a diversion. That mist poison needle caused Jiang Wei to turn his camera so he didn't see the brick and left the back of his head wide open. This. What kind of strategy was this? He'd never heard of such a thing before. Jiang Wei was utterly baffled. And in that tooth-for-tooth exchange, what was with that disperse powder? He understood that even less. End chapter. The King's Avatar, Chapter 1144. A Hurried Core. Audio source, WuXiaWorldAudiobook.com. Chapter 1144. A Hurried Core. Translator, Gnome Yummy. Editor, Gnome Yummy. Jiang Wei couldn't grasp Steamed Bun's train of thought. At this moment, his endless forest was in a dizzy state. No glory player would miss this kind of opportunity to attack. Steamed Bun Invasion stepped forward. He gripped Endless Forest's neck with a strangle and let loose punches and kicks. Witches had far better close combat capabilities compared to elementalists. Enhancing the broom with magic dust had once been a popular playstyle. However, for defense, besides battle mages who could activate magic shield to forcefully take a burst of damage, mages were quite frail. After a strangle combo along with the previous tyrannical chain punch, Endless Forest's health had dropped by 20%. The opening wasn't going well. Endless Forest was able to escape from the combo and fly away with his broom. He hadn't been able to find an opening to launch a counterattack, so he planned on resetting back to neutral and starting over. However, this map had a vast empty horizon. Endless Forest could only pull a bit of distance between them. He wasn't able to actually hide anywhere. While in the air, Jiang Wei had his character look back and saw Steamed Bun Invasion chasing closely after him. He could see all sorts of openings to attack and felt an unbearable urge to act. Could it be some sort of weird trick again? Jiang Wei carefully analyzed the situation and repeatedly reassured himself. Endless Forest leapt in the air and swept with his broom, using a witch's unique way of attacking to strike Steamed Bun Invasion. Then, he saw Steamed Bun Invasion turn around and immediately run away. Jiang Wei was puzzled. He was truly at a loss. What is going on? As soon as I turned around to attack, he ran away. What is he thinking? He can't be thinking of chasing me from behind and hoping that I stand still for him to attack me, right? While still in a daze, he suddenly noticed an object flying towards him in his field of vision. Another one. This time, Jiang Wei was prepared. Endless Forest swept his broom in the air and twisted his body to dodge the brick. How dangerous. It was a very normal attack, but Jiang Wei could feel cold sweat running down his back. He had lost focus for just an instant again. A little bit closer and that brick would have hit. When fighting against this Steamed Bun, it's really hard to concentrate. During this time, Steamed Bun raised his hand again. Jiang Wei didn't even think about what Steamed Bun might be doing. He immediately had Endless Forest sweep his broom again to dodge. A poison needle flitted by. Brawlers had quite a few mid-range attacks. After this poison needle, Steamed Bun Invasion raised his hand once more. You're going to keep going. What's the point? Jiang Wei didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He had his Endless Forest sweep his broom in the air another time. I didn't move. Jiang Wei blanked out. He immediately realized what had happened and wanted to cry. Trying to react now was too late. A Molotov cocktail smashed into Endless Forest, setting him ablaze. Endless Forest turned into a giant fireball and crashed towards the ground. Hot witches can only sweep their brooms 6 times. You don't even understand that? What a noob. Steamed Bun even typed some trash talk in the chat. Jiang Wei was so angry that his lungs were about to explode. Pro players made mistakes. Sometimes those mistakes were low-level ones. For example, he had forgotten to count how many sweeps he had left, which was indeed a beginner mistake. As the saying goes, a man is prone to stumbling when walking, and a horse is prone to stumbling when galloping. Quote, in any case, the word noob shouldn't be used to describe a pro player, let alone one that had fought in the pro scene for 8 years. He was undoubtedly a veteran that had stood the test of time. Jiang Wei was furious. Unfortunately, Endless Forest's current fireball appearance was truly a manifestation of his mistake. On the ground, Steamed Bun was already waiting for him with a sand toss ready in his hands. Jiang Wei didn't even need to think to dodge. Endless Forest twisted his body, turning his head at the same time. Suddenly, a brick hit him. Jiang Wei was about to go crazy. A sand toss to force him to turn his head and then a brick. What a shallow and outdated move. Who does that anymore? But the guy in front of him was happily using it with gusto. That previous poison needle had been the same principle. Was this guy treating this pro match like the in-game arena? Jiang Wei would occasionally go there to have some fun, and quite a few outdated moves in the pro scene were used a lot among normal players like Steamed Bun's previous move. But the important part was that this shallow and outdated move had actually worked. After being put into a dizzy state, Endless Forest was given a fierce beating. His health dropped a large chunk again. And this time, Jiang Wei was bent on revenge. He wasn't going to retreat and wait for an opportunity like before. He was planning on directly finding an opening and attack the other side. Even ordinary old-timers could be angry. Steamed Bun obviously wasn't able to execute a perfect combo. Not long afterwards, Jiang Wei found an opening. Endless Forest swept his broom at Steamed Bun Invasion and fiercely attacked him. Steamed Bun Invasion went on the defensive and soon found an opportunity too. He seized it and gave Endless Forest a blow or two. Bang bang bang. The two got into a messy scuffle. In the end, Jiang Wei was experienced. There was order to his randomness. He was constantly calculating the costs to each trade. However, like before, Jiang Wei was unable to figure out Steamed Bun. In this scuffle, he clearly had the advantage. He had almost caught up. Their health bars were nearly even now. But Steamed Bun didn't seem to have any intentions of trying anything different. He seemed as if he were content with continuing this fight in this way. What is he planning? Jiang Wei couldn't help think to himself, but he was unable to make heads or tails out of it. Their team had analyzed that when fighting Steamed Bun, he should play it by ear and act whenever he saw an opportunity, but the problem was that he couldn't find any opportunities, so how could he act on them? Whatever, let's just keep going. Jiang Wei threw caution to the wind, and he kept fighting Steamed Bun in this way. And then he won, just like that. You're pretty good. When Endless Forest cleaned up the last of Steamed Bun Invasion's health, Steamed Bun left these dying words. During the entire match, the two hadn't really talked with each other. Only Steamed Bun Invasion had said a few words. The first time he talked, he called Zhang Wei a noob. The second time he talked, he said Zhang Wei was good. His two remarks were polar opposites. There hadn't been any setup for this sudden turnaround. I won. The word glory jumped onto his screen. Steamed Bun Invasion had turned into a corpse on the ground. WuxiaWorldAudio.com. Zhang Wei was still in a daze. I won, just like that? What type of match was that? Had there been any crazy technical moves? Had there been any meaningful interactions? Had there been anything noteworthy enough to reflect upon? Zhang Wei came out from his player booth. When he came down, his brows were furrowed the entire time as if he had been the loser. He couldn't help but look towards Happy. He looked at that guy, Bao Rongxing, who returned to Happy's player bench in high spirits, walking confidently and freely as if he had been the winner. What a pity. I almost won. Zhang Wei could hear Steamed Bun say to his teammates. Zhang Wei nearly tripped. What do you mean almost won? It wasn't even close. With your inability to adapt, any knowledgeable person could have foreseen that you would lose. Could it be that you couldn't see it? Even if you couldn't, the others in Happy should be able to. What about Yishu? It was a pity. Better luck next time. Yishu said. Fuck. Yishu was agreeing. What the heck? Had he really been in danger just before? I had narrowly escaped from the gates of hell by just a fluke. Zhang Wei was a veteran that had joined the scene in Season 3. He had witnessed the pinnacle of Yishu's career and didn't doubt this god's capabilities. With even Yishu agreeing with Steamed Bun's remark, Zhang Wei suddenly started to doubt himself. Nice job. Quote, a teammate said to him at this moment. It was a common encouragement from a teammate. What a close call. Zhang Wei subconsciously blurted out. Ah, how is that close? His teammate looked weirdly at him. Huh. Zhang Wei also looked weirdly at his teammate. It wasn't close. He couldn't help but look at Happy's side. Steamed Bun had already sat back down, chatting exuberantly with the person next to him. Zhang Wei couldn't hear him clearly, but it sounded like he was very proud of himself. How come the listener looked like he wanted to cry out SOS though? What exactly went wrong? Zhang Wei went into deep thought. At this moment, the individual competence third round began. 100 Blossoms Zhou Yuan versus Happy Suma Chung. It was a confrontation between two gunners. However, Suma Chung had become famous far earlier than Zhou Yuan. Zhou Yuan was also very famous right now, but this fame had always made him feel uneasy. He had originally been a normal second-year player, ready to stand up from the bench. He would do his best whenever the team needed him and strive for more opportunities. After the team dragged him from the bench, they refused to let him sit back down and even gave him the team's symbol, Dazzling 100 Blossoms. Such treatment should be the dream of any pro player. Zhou Yuan had dreamt of this before too, but he would have never imagined this dream would come true. When Zhang Jiali suddenly retired, the team wasn't able to find a suitable Spitfire player, so they pushed him forward to take on the role. In the span of a single night, he became everyone's hope. He became the future of Team 100 Blossoms. He became the successor to Zhang Jiali. Before that day, no one had ever said these words to him. After that day, Zhou Yuan didn't feel happiness and joy, but fear and panic. He felt like he had been tossed into a maelstrom without anyone to guide him out of it. That season, Zhou Yuan didn't perform too well, but because of the fans' love for Dazzling 100 Blossoms, he had been pushed into All-Stars. All-Star Team Core Ace Player. Zhou Yuan obtained what many strive for without any difficulties, to the extent that he couldn't escape from these responsibilities even if he wanted to. However, Zhou Yuan knew very well that nothing here was real. That season, he had risen along with Tang Hao, who shined endlessly. Tang Hao had been Team 100 Blossom's true pillar. And him? He had probably been seen as a burden who occupied a toilet but didn't shit. Zhou Yuan bitterly hung on for an entire season, persevering with something he simply couldn't do. When that season ended, Zhou Yuan was at a loss for his future. He had been the core of a team for a season, but he didn't feel confident in himself in the slightest. Then, Zhang Jiali returned and joined Team Tyranny, who purchased dazzling 100 Blossoms. Having lost this character, Zhou Yuan thought he would be kicked out. Who would have thought that the team would immediately look for him and discuss creating a new Spitfire for him? They would also find him a suitable partner to rebuild the team's core. This time, he wouldn't be pushed to do something beyond his abilities like last season. This time, the team truly wanted to nurture him. After a season of struggle and confusion as the core, the team still wanted him as the core? Zhou Yuan truly felt like a dream had come true. Then, Team Blue Rain's Yufeng joined and together they formed the new 100 Blossoms. The team didn't break their promise and created a new Spitfire, Blooming Blossoms, according to his habits and strengths. He was capable. He shouldn't be considered Zhang Jiali's substitute. Team 100 Blossoms introduced him as such and The King's Avatar, Chapter 1145 Launcher vs Spitfire 1, Audio Source, WuxiaWorldAudiobook.com. Chapter 1145, Launcher vs Spitfire 1. Translator, No Yummy. Editor, No Yummy. The 5-second countdown passed quickly. This match was undoubtedly the first highlight of today's battle. 2 all-star players, 2 all-star characters. Although Zhou Yuan's status as an all-star was partly fueled by the emotions of 100 Blossoms fans. After one season, his ability was beginning to gain attention and recognition, and he himself steadily gained confidence. The match began, and Zhou Yuan had his Spitfire Bright Blossoms rush towards the center of the map. Blood and Blossoms. Team 100 Blossoms had wanted to recreate this duo. But it was a shame, for this world had only one Zhang Jiali, and only one Sun Zheping, and therefore only one Blood and Blossoms. Recreating this pairing was 100 Blossoms' dream, or at least the blueprint that they drew out for their fans. But in reality, Zhou Yuan had his own style, and Yufeng wasn't very much like Sun Zheping. No matter what, it would be impossible for these two to completely make the partnership between Zhang Jiali and Sun Zheping. But, so what? The inimitable wasn't necessarily the strongest. From the start, Yufeng hadn't been very interested in recreating their style anyway. He had come from Blue Rain, a team aiming for the championship win, because he wanted to build an era that was entirely his. He certainly wasn't here to be a copy of anyone else. During the first half of last season, they had attempted to recreate Blood and Blossoms, but 100 Blossoms' performance hadn't been very good. Afterwards, Yufeng and Zhou Yuan made adjustments. They coordinated with one another in a more comfortable way based off their personal habits and personal styles. 100 Blossoms' immediately performance went up. Now, neither of them would become confused. They would use their own style to surpass their seniors and establish a partnership that was entirely their own. Even though the outside world still called them Blood and Blossoms, they believed that they would eventually earn a name that was entirely their own. Carrying this belief, Zhou Yuan and 100 Blossoms greeted the new season together. In the first round, they encountered Heavenly Swords, and with them one of the previous creators of Blood and Blossoms, Sun Zheping. In that match, Sun Zheping won 1 point in the individual round, and although his opponent was neither Zhou Yuan nor Yufeng, the world still made the comparison between junior and senior. Heavenly Swords lost overall, but Sun Zheping's 1 point stood out, and later discussions painted him as if he were the victor. These sort of irresponsible remarks left Zhou Yuan feeling helpless. All he could do was focus and battle well. I must win this point beautifully. This was the goal that Zhou Yuan set for himself. He knew that the opponent he was about to face was no pushover, but the greater the difficulty, the greater the value of this point. Bright blossoms quickly reached the center of the map, and Zhou Yuan saw Dancing Rain rapidly approaching from the other side of the map. Dancing Rain was absolutely an all-star character, but after her return to the league, everyone discovered that Dancing Rain hadn't grown as much as expected of such an all-star character. For most teams, their all-star characters were the focus of their upgrades after the level cap was raised. After Happy upgraded Boundless Sea's silver weapon Mirror Moon to level 75, every all-star character's weapon was level 75. As for their other silver equipment, that varied between teams and depended on their conditions. But although Dancing Rain was an extremely qualified character, an all-star launcher, her current equipment was somewhat lacking. Her weapon Devouring Sun was the only silver equipment she had. It was clear that while she was in excellent era after the level 75 update, Dancing Rain hadn't had an important place in their upgrading plans. Of course, another reason was that Excellent Era's materials gathering hadn't progressed very smoothly during that time. Now, comparing these all-stars just by their equipment, Bright Blossoms was in much better shape. This account was wearing 5 level 75 equipment, which was considered very good. In terms of characters, 100 Blossoms had the upper hand. What about player condition? Su Mucheng had gone a whole year without playing any pro matches, while Zhou Yuan had improved his technique, awareness, and temperament over the course of the past year. In terms of condition, it seemed that 100 Blossoms held the upper hand here as well. This was the analysis conducted by 100 Blossoms on Su Mucheng and Dancing Rain. Now in this confrontation, Zhou Yuan was completely confident. He didn't make any move to avoid her, and prepared to meet her head-on. He might not have moved strategically, but when Su Mucheng saw Bright Blossoms, she was the one to change direction. Zhou Yuan was confident, but not arrogant. Seeing Su Mucheng's careful avoidance, he didn't rush forward. The map for this battle consisted of narrow streets, and in theory it didn't really suit long-ranged classes, because there were simply too many ways to find cover from an attack. But both players were gunners here, so there wasn't any advantage to be had here. It couldn't be forgotten that this was Happy's home game. They were the ones to choose the map, and Su Mucheng was no rookie, having more experience than even Zhou Yuan. She chose this map, so she must have some plan. Her current maneuvering must be to take advantage of the special characteristics of this map. So, Zhou Yuan didn't rush forward. He studied his surroundings, and after studying the paths he could take, he chose to circle around to intercept her. But right when Bright Blossoms changed directions, a commotion arose from the audience. From their omniscient view, the audience saw the full picture of what was going on. Su Mucheng's Dancing Rain, after changing paths, wasn't trying to move around in a roundabout way, but instead chose to stand and wait in that position. After Bright Blossoms decided to circle around, Dancing Rain emerged again, and came around behind Bright Blossoms. Glory wasn't Counter-Strike, there was no chance of a one-hit knockout. But in a battle between experts, the first to attack had a high chance of seizing the initiative for the entire battle. In the current situation, Su Mucheng undoubtedly had the advantage. Dancing Rain quietly crept around behind Bright Blossoms and began to launch an attack at his exposed back. But who would have thought? At this moment Zhou Yuan's Bright Blossoms suddenly stopped moving, and just stood there in that narrow street, as though in deep thought. The audience couldn't see anything from the projection, but on screen, where they were displaying Bright Blossom's camera view, everyone suddenly saw that from Bright Blossom's currently slightly diagonal position, he could see both in front and behind him. Zhou Yuan hadn't neglected his back, he had made preparations for 2 possibilities. With this method, he hadn't really seized any opportunities, but at least he wouldn't let his opponent have an easy time. He wanted to pull this battle back to a face-to-face confrontation, which, in a way, reflected Zhou Yuan's confidence. Of course, Su Mucheng had no way of predicting all of Zhou Yuan's plans. She circled around, and as soon as she appeared, Zhou Yuan saw her out of the edge of his vision. Su Muchung saw that Bright Blossoms was just standing there as though he had gone offline, so she didn't move to dodge or hide, and immediately fired an attack. The sneak attack didn't work, and the two were now directly throwing attacks at each other. The battle was progressing the way Zhou Yuan had hoped it would. He readjusted this focus and prepared for a good direct fight. But Bright Blossoms had barely managed to take 2 steps forward. He hadn't even fired his first shot when Dancing Rain's powerful smothering attack arrived. Zhou Yuan had no choice but to first evade the attack, but with this evasion, he immediately lost the initiative. Even a launcher's normal attacks carried an AoE effect. Not a single one was a point attack, and so all their attacks were AoE. The only difference was the extent of the area of effect. As a result, Zhou Yuan discovered that he had made a mistake. He had picked this position so that Bright Blossoms could see both sides, but it was too narrow here. WuxiaWorldAudio.com. When the launcher attacked here, Zhou Yuan suddenly found that he had no way of dodging this position. Zhou Yuan finally realized how disadvantageous this position was for him. For the launcher, it was like shooting fish in a barrel. It was impossible to go forward, so his only choice was to control Bright Blossoms to retreat backward, which would be a difficult task. Of the 24 classes in Glory, the launcher had the largest attack range, and Dancing Rain was an all-star character. In Excellent Era, she would often have to use a screen cannon strategy to coordinate, and so her equipment boosted her attack range even further. And now he wanted to try to increase the distance and escape her range, but how could it be that easy? Zhou Yuan of course couldn't rely just on movement to escape. Under the rain of bullets, Bright Blossoms ate the damage and tossed out 2 grenades. One of the grenades instantly exploded. The screens displaying the match to the audience turned a flashing white. It was a flash bullet, and Dancing Rain was clearly affected. That flashing white screen was her current camera view. But the attacks didn't stop. In these conditions, Dancing Rain was still using her heavy cannon, spitting out dense blasts in front of her. Bright Blossom's other grenade was a smoke bullet, and the smoke was already roiling in the air. But not even the flash bullet was enough to stop Su Muchung's attacks. Would the reduced vision caused by the smoke be an obstacle for her? It didn't seem so. Dancing Rain was engulfed in the smoke, but her footsteps didn't stop, nor did her attacks. To attack here, she didn't even need to see. Flash bullet, smoke bullet, these things became meaningless. The audience was stunned. What kind of skill did it take to be able to fight blind like this? Immediately, sound of applause rose from the audience. Of course, Zhou Yuan obviously couldn't hear. He had come into the match filled with confidence, but now he was already a little panicked. From the audience's perspective, neither of his grenades had affected Dancing Rain's attacks at all. But Zhou Yuan, in-game, could see more clearly, and he knew that Su Muchung's attacks had changed. The instant her vision was blocked, her attacks became even stronger, even fiercer. The area affected by her attacks instantly became even larger. In such a condition, she actually gained an even greater initiative. But Zhou Yuan wasn't prepared to lose just like this. Ever since he had built up his confidence, his playstyle had become tougher. Flash bullet, smoke bullet, these skills could be used to create a turning point, and Zhou Yuan wasn't about to let them go to waste. Su Muchung wasn't affected by her loss of vision, so he could add some more attacks to cause trouble for her. Bright Blossoms didn't retreat and counterattacked. End chapter.